You're listening to Siris Says podcast. Join us as we transcend cultural barriers and elevate diverse voices. Here, we inspire, inform, and empower one story at a time. Let's dive in. Welcome back, guys, to another episode of Siris Says. If you're a return listener, welcome. Thank you for watching another episode. And if you're new, well, we're happy to have you. So today I have a very special guest who's actually a very close friend. We've known each other for quite some time. Met her in LA. She's always a fantastic friend. She's very spontaneous. And today we're talking about traveling because she actually loves to travel. Her name is Vanessa Ayala. How are you doing, Vanessa?
I'm doing well. Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here finally.
Yay! So exciting. So, Vanessa, let's give the audience a little bit of background. You're Salvadorian, and that's it? Salvadorian?
Yes, 100%.
Yes.
Salvadorian, born in the U.S., but both of my parents are Salvadorian.
Oh, that's awesome. You were born here and you grew up here. Did you always knew you wanted to travel?
No, I did not. The only place that I really went to was El Salvador. Since I was like maybe 3, I can remember. And other than that, I wouldn't travel anywhere outside of the country but El Salvador. I would go to other cities like Las Vegas. I think a lot of people go to Las Vegas, but other than that, no. I never was exposed.
How was it growing up a Latina that's going back and forth? Was that hard because you're living in the United States? There's a different culture in El Salvador. So was that fun? Was that intriguing? How did that feel growing up and going back and forth?
I actually remember, I think growing up, I did not like going to El Salvador because, we're used to having hot water, having McDonald's, the comfort. Yeah, like I was born in the States, so that's what I was used to. So when I would go to El Salvador, I would go to my abuelita's house and she didn't have hot water. So I would be like complaining to my mom, and I didn't have any friends in El Salvador, like my age, or my cousins were a little older than me or too young. So I like getting on the plane. I liked the plane ride and the experience, but once I got there, I was like, okay, we're never gonna go back until I was older. I think that's when I really was able to appreciate traveling more than when I was younger.
Awesome. So you went to school. When did you start really like saying to yourself, I want to do this? Because I know you travel by yourself, which is very unique. Not a lot of people are as brave, including me, to just go by yourself. I have yet to actually do that by myself. I think it's very powerful. It's something we talked about it before.
Yep.
So when was the first time, around what age were you when you were like, okay, I'm ready for this?
Well, I have a little story, that kind of got me to traveling unintentionally, I would say. So I was a junior in college. I went to Cal Poly Pomona. Hey, the Broncos, shout out. So I think it was my junior year. I can't remember the class, but it was like an international something type of class, right? So in that class, I had a Korean professor, and one of her projects was to watch a Korean drama, and I still remember the Korean drama's name was Playhouse, and she wanted us to compare Korean culture based on that drama. She wanted for us to watch like 6 episodes. It wasn't even like the whole drama, and then compare Korean culture to American culture. And then after that, I watched the Korean drama and I was infatuated. I know it's a drama, but I was in my 20s, and I was like, oh my God, these
They're
Korean,
addictive.
Yes. And the Korean guys, I was like, oh, they're so cute, I never thought I liked Koreans. But then after I did that project, she was part of the international committee where they did study abroad programs. So she was like, are you interested in doing an exchange program? And it's only for the summer. It's 2 months. The first month you're going to teach English in Korea, and the second month you're going to take a class from your electives. So one of them was Korean, for example.
Was this pay?
No, there was a scholarship. So you were able to apply, and if you got it, which I did, they paid for half. So I from what I remember, I paid like $1,200 just for like whatever else was needed. I can't remember. I remember I was able to do it, and then because of the drama, I fell in love with Korean culture through the drama, and I was like, I want to go visit. I thought I was gonna meet a Korean actor. I didn't, but in my heart, I was like, maybe I'll bump into one of them.
And you never know.
Fast forward later on, I'll tell you a little bit about how I did meet a Korean actor.
Yeah.
But at that time, that was my hope, and I actually was able to go to that exchange program for 2 months over the summer, and I loved it. That's how I got into it.
Okay, so we'll go about it with the steps. So you get this chance to go to Korea through your teacher who told you about this program, and then you have to tell your parents. And so how did that talk went? Because that's a big challenge, you know, especially with Latino parents. They're very overprotective, and then there's this always like, oh, don't get into trouble, you know.
They worry.
Or why you go into something that is so unknown to them, so they don't feel comfortable you attempting it as well, you know. There's always that protection. So how did that talk went?
I'm trying to remember when I told my mom, and it was actually not a good experience. So I remember telling her I wanted to go to an exchange program. Me dijo, ¿cómo vas a pagar? That means how are you going to pay for it? And I told her, like, hey, you know, like, they're going to pay part of it. And then I had a part-time job. I always, since I was 17, I had a part-time job. I could save, you know, and anything that I can contribute to, you can help me maybe. And I do remember them contributing just 500. I mean, maybe it's not just for some families, but you know, I thought it was pretty reasonable, $500, everything else I saved. So I kind of outlined my plan. I outlined the benefits of it, you know, and I outlined how my professor was going to go because she was going to go with us. I told her that it was part of like my studies, and they, you know, Latino parents are big on like education and growing through your professional education. So they agreed. But they thought I was crazy. I did get those comments like, te vas a venir, you're going to come back like in a week. You're not going to be able to withstand. And I'm like, okay. Watch me, yeah. Because I'm adventurous like that, right? So they did. And I remember my mom taking me to the airport, and she like cried. I'm like, Mom, I'm coming in 2 months. But you know, this is a 14-hour flight. And it's across the world.
Yeah, and I'm sure that through their mind is going through like, if there's an emergency, how do I take care of you, because you're just going to be so far away.
Yeah, where are you going to stay? We don't even speak the language. Like, all those worries. But it worked out. I mean.
So you take the flight, you get there. What's your first experience there?
The airport. Yeah. I mean, you know, everybody's like, 안녕하세요. Like, I mean, I did learn Korean through those dramas, to be honest. Like I did pick up like the survival Korean, but once you're there, you're just like, what? But I mean, there was a whole group, and there were people waiting for us and taking us there, so it wasn't that bad. But it was like, oh damn, I'm really here. And the cool thing, it was that I had a lot of people from Cal Poly going there, so I felt like I wasn't 100% alone, because there were students from my college. So I feel like I still had people from the States, you know? And there was other colleges too from the States, Long Beach, San Bernardino. So it wasn't too bad. I think it would have been a little bit more challenging if I was going there on my own with no one. So it was a good little midway, I think.
No, that for sure. So you get there, the first experience, obviously the language difference, and then that trip went really well.
It did.
And everything went well.
Everything went well. I met great people.
Okay, awesome. So then
Koreans.
A lot of Koreans, yeah.
Well, what they did is that they matched us, some of us, with a Korean college student, so they can have that cultural exchange. They were really big on that.
This was how many years ago around?
That was, I graduated from college in 2012. So that was 2011, because it was my junior year.
Were the students there very progressive? Understanding?
Absolutely.
Like,
they wanted to
open and excited to meet you guys. Oh, that's awesome.
If anything, I think they wanted to meet foreigners because they don't have a lot of opportunity. It wasn't in the city either. It was like outskirts. Gyeonggi-do province, which is an hour from Seoul. So foreigners is like, I get to practice and just really immerse in the culture, which in actuality, I think we immerse in their culture, but they also felt that exchange, you know?
Yeah, I think I have another friend that did that for Italy. They went to Italy, and they did that in Italy as well. So I think it's pretty common in the United States. A lot of the university have that exchange program. But like you said, you have to kind of be brave and
to be
open-minded, the different language, being uncomfortable with a bunch of people that you don't know, the food, right? The exchange, right? Currency is different. So in your brain, you have to calculate things a little bit different too.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I can imagine. So then you come back, and did that kind of put a seed in you of like, oh my God, I want to do this again, or what?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think I want to say that people who I met there, either they wanted to come back or they hated it.
Oh,
if I'm being honest, there's a couple, I would say like a good 10 that I know of that left throughout the program. They couldn't stand the difference of
right
culture.
Away as they got there?
The food was one of a big thing. The change of time, right? Because if you've ever traveled and that was your first time traveling, when it's daytime over here is nighttime over there. So
there's that adjustment period where you have to time change. Yeah.
If you're not open, you can't adapt to that, it's hard. A lot of people told me that they had homesickness. Yeah, and then they decided to go back home. There's a lot of people who caught a flight back home 2 weeks later.
Oh, wow.
And we had a whole orientation. So it wasn't like you just went to teaching and meeting. Like it was a 2-week orientation. They introduced you to the school, to the students. So it was a whole process and people left throughout the orientation period. Some people couldn't make it. And then when I came back home from my trip, I loved it. I loved it and I was like, I'm going to go back. And this is where it was the hardest. My parents had a hard time with me deciding to go back.
No, we'll definitely talk about it. So we'll take a quick pause and then when we come back, we'll talk more about that journey that you took to Korea. For how many years were you there?
5.
So yeah, when we come back, you guys will hear that. Today's episode is sponsored by RenovateMagicHub.com, your guide to transforming your home. Whether you're updating a room or planning a full makeover, Renovate Magic Hub provides tailored product suggestions to suit your style and budget. Visit RenovateMagicHub.com for inspiring and practical tips to create a space you'll love. Welcome back, guys, from the sponsorship. So, Vanessa, as we were talking, now we dive into you living outside of the United States. For how many years were you in Korea?
5 years.
Jesus, long.
There was a break in between though. Like there was a 2-year break in between for my master's program.
Okay.
Yes.
That's fair. And how was it going there? Because you were by yourself.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I remember telling my mom after like, okay, I'm going to graduate from college, 5 years in college from Cal Poly, and I'm going to go. And she laughed. She said, yeah, you're not going to go. And I'm like, no, I'm going to go and I don't know how long. And I think that was the biggest thing for her, right? Like me not having a comeback date. And then she was like, all right. And then I remember telling her 6 months later from when I graduated, I'm like, I got a visa. What happens is that the employer has to give you a visa. So I wanted to go teach out there and I applied online. I did the interview online and they send you like the information to go to the Korean consulate and get a visa. And I did all that. So I told my mom when I did all of that, when I had like the okay to go. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to get a flight. They're paying for it because they paid for that flight. Right. And she was like, when are you leaving? 2 months. In 2 months. And a Latina mom was like, she started crying and she started being like, oh my God, how long? And all this. And I'm like, I don't know because I didn't know back then. Like I just was going to go teach and I was in my early 20s, adventurous, you know, like this is a one life.
You're open-minded. You didn't know what to expect, so to speak.
I didn't. I just knew that I was going to get paid and I was going to have housing that they paid for and they were going to pick me up from the airport. That's all I knew.
What?
Yes.
That takes a special person, Vanny.
I have always been, I say adventurous. People call it crazy, I call it adventurous.
Yeah, I think it's adventurous for sure.
I was in my 20s too, so at that point you're like, let's live life, you know? So that was my mindset. And then I went there. I laughed because I was in the middle of nowhere. Like 3 hours away from the city, from civilization.
Like Seoul? Or
no,
a different city? Because Seoul is the capital.
Seoul is the capital.
It's big.
It was 3 hours from Seoul. So it was the middle. It's the countryside.
You were in the country.
In the countryside, where no one has ever seen a foreigner. There were 3 foreigners in my city. And I went out there and I loved it. I stayed there for a year. And then I moved closer to the city, which is still far. Quezon. I remember it was Quezon, the first place. And then it was Gyeonggi-do, an hour away. So I would go stay in like the rural area. And then I would go to Seoul on my weekends.
Well, yeah, because you're young.
So I wanted to experience the city.
Experience the city.
Exactly.
And then meet people your age. And,
exactly. Cool thing is that we had other teachers. I wasn't by myself. They were from other countries, but it was nice to kind of not feel like you're the only foreigner there. And then I wanted to get my master's. So I came back to the States.
Nice.
And then I went back after.
You went back for the same experience.
Yeah.
Going back, why did you go back? What do you think Vanessa wanted to go back?
I actually think about this now, like why did I go back, right? And I think when you're living in another country, either you want to stay here for the rest of your life or your limit where it's like, I want to go back and this was temporary. And I think that when I left the first time, I was not done with Korea, right? I was just like, I can give a little bit more, but I kind of wanted to get my master's, right? I wanted to get my master's. And I was like, okay, Korea was making it very complicated. I actually looked into it. And
how to get your master's?
And not to get my master's, but for it to count as a master's in the States if I wanted to go back. Yeah. And I was in that limbo, like, do I want to go back for good? Do I want to stay?
Doing your journey and then you figure, okay, I need to get my master's. Yes. Then that's what made you go back, but it wasn't because you wanted to leave. That was just really...
Exactly. Okay, I didn't want to leave, so I feel like I didn't have my Korean fix fully. Yeah. So then after I got my master's, like, I want to go back. But there was a huge shift. I went back and actually taught at a university, which is like the highest level of teaching you can do. I got paid amazing. They paid for everything. And 1 year in, and I was like, I'm homesick. And that was my sign. I don't want to live here.
Wow. For the first time?
For the first time, wow. I felt like that anxiety, like I want to leave. Nothing happened.
Nothing happened. It started to occur to you, the anxiety. Okay.
Yeah, like nothing happened where I was like, oh, I just like this work or I don't want to be here. It was just more like I maxed my time in Korea. And I think that's the breaking point where I have friends. I remember my friend Maria, shout out to Maria. She still lives out there and I met her.
Till this day?
And she's going to get married eventually with her boyfriend, Korean boyfriend. And that's where I feel like either you stay there or you hit that point where you're like, I want to go back, and you never go back. So now I just would only go visit.
That makes sense. And I think also, I mean, you're in your early 20s. It's so exciting. Everything happens so naturally. But then as you get older progressively, you start to think, okay, about the long term, right? Like, where do I want my life to go? And you want to date somebody, and then you start to like, when am I going to get married? And what kind of person do I want? And all those questions happen. Then kids, and I see why you got homesick, essentially.
Yeah. I did start thinking about those things. Like, I think one of the biggest things, that plus my parents are so far away and they're getting older. And Latino, I would say generally speaking, like we're very close. We're very, like family based. And I'm like, damn, do I really want to be for the rest of my life 14 hours away?
Long trip, yeah.
And mind you, my mom came twice to Korea. My brother came. Yes, absolutely. She was in the mercados, in the Korean markets, freaking trying.
Enjoying it when she was there.
She was bargaining with these Korean ladies they both didn't speak the language, right? The Korean ladies didn't speak Spanish and vice versa. They didn't speak Korean. And she still got deals. How? I don't know. Because I was working when she was hustling at the market.
Wow.
But
talk about making a deal.
Yes, making a deal. I was like, Mom, how did you even get those grapes for that price? And she was like, I don't know. Body language. I was like, all right, do you?
I love that. Yeah. So she came to visit you twice. That's special. That's cool. And just your mom?
Yes. My mom came to the rural, like when I first moved, and then to the city. And with my uncle from El Salvador. And my dad never came because he was working. So he couldn't. But he was busy, but he would have loved to. And my brother came one time to the city.
That's cool. So you came back finally to the United States after the second time. Yep. And then that's when you start doing your solo traveling. Right away, or you waited a little bit?
No. Actually, not when I was... doing the exchange program, but when I moved to Korea after I graduated, that's when I started doing my solo traveling.
You were traveling out of Korea?
When I moved, after I finished college and I moved to Korea to teach my full time, that's when I was able to. So I started with like close by countries. So like Japan is an hour away or two. Oh. I went to Vietnam. It was like 2 hours away. So Southeast Asia area.
Cool. So you were already exploring around you.
Yeah. When I was like 22 maybe. Okay. Yeah. And through living in Korea, I think that's what exposed me to traveling. That's what made it easier.
Are people there very prone to traveling a lot outside?
Foreigners who teach in Korea, I'm assuming other countries as well. Yes. That's the thing to do. Oh. You never stay on your vacation in Korea.
or the place that you're teaching, you tend to go out. That's a common theme you saw in teachers.
Everyone did it.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
It wasn't a common theme. It's like, that was like a to-do thing. And you would do it with your coworkers. Because obviously they were off at the same time as you.
Yeah, of course. Wow, that makes sense. Oh, okay. I didn't think about that. That's very interesting. Okay. So now we're diving into solo traveling. So how did you even get to be brave in solo traveling? Because you're also a woman, which has its own pros and cons. So what were the things that you had to be more aware of,
That's
and
a
you're
good
also
question.
petite.
I know.
She's a petite lady. She's feisty, but no,
I love feisty,
No.
But it's funny because I did start my traveling experience in other countries with coworkers.
Okay.
But then eventually it got to a point where you got used to traveling on like over the summer or whenever you had a time off. But then your coworkers didn't want to go to the same places as you.
Oh.
And I was like, let me go on my own. I don't remember the first country I went by myself, but I remember being like, I'm going to try it. And I'm pretty spontaneous. I would say, an easy person to get along with, and I'm open to trying new things. Yeah. And I did it, and it was like not that bad. And the cool thing about it is like you don't have to wait for anybody to get ready. You don't have to take anybody's like consideration, like where they want to go, what time they want to wake up. And I actually really liked it. And the coolest thing about that was that because I was broke back then, like I was teaching, but it wasn't paid like a lot, you know.
Yeah, I mean, in the beginning, in your early 20s, you don't get paid a lot.
Yes,
so
you just
money is limited. Yeah. So what did you do to, accommodate that?
I would stay at hostels. And hostels are very cheap. You paid, I remember the first hostel I stayed in was 15 people, unisex, men and women. So you just had a bed, like bunk beds, but 15 of them. Wow. And you had to wear earplugs. They gave you earplugs because, there's people who snore really loud. Yeah. And they gave you lockers with locks because you just don't know who you're sleeping with.
Your personal stuff.
Yeah.
To make sure,
But those people were like you. There were solo travelers, there were foreigners. A lot of them spoke English. And then you would go to the tours with them. You would get drunk with them because they were doing the exact same thing as you were. So I met a lot of really cool friends who I'm still friends with from other countries.
Oh, wow.
So I'm actually able to go to their home countries and at least meet with them, sometimes stay with them depending on their living situation. Yeah. So I had that culture exchange like I did when I first went to my first trip to Korea.
That's cool.
So,
yeah, to gain that is very powerful. And then they get to come to visit you too.
Exactly.
You do that. I think it's so much better when you do it that way, honestly. Visiting, obviously having a local person that can show you the best spots.
Exactly.
Because as much as you want to read online, I mean, it's hard sometimes. It's just too much information. It's like...
Exactly. Like, where do I go? And the homestays were my favorite part. Like you said, like let's say I have a friend in Taiwan and they're like, oh, stay with me and my family. And you get the full experience. You're immersed in the culture. Right. And if you're open-minded and open to doing that, you just learn so much about that culture and that families particularly.
I love that. That's cool. That's cool. All right, Vanny. So top 5 things to be aware of, to be mindful as a solo traveler.
Oh my God, I have a list. But the first thing is doing your research. I think that's like a must do. There's a lot of websites for solo travelers. I can't remember the name, Planet something, I can't remember. But that's a website where you get a lot of solo travelers. Hostel World is a website where you get a lot of hostels for cheap prices, but it's a lot of foreigners and it's known. You read the reviews, don't just go by the ratings of, I think the ratings are 1 to 5 stars. You have to read the reviews because what might be a big no-no to you might not be a big no-no to another person. So for me, noise wasn't a big deal. Like I'll put my earplugs, but if you're telling me they have roaches,
that's a big no-no for
That's a big no-no.
Right.
Other people might want a 5-bedroom all-women's dorm. Other people might not mind a 15 unisex dorm for cheaper. Some people might want to be in the city where they don't have to take a lot of transportation, right? They have the main attractions in one, like walking distance. And some of them might want to be in the freaking ranch or in the rural area to experience the real authentic culture experience. So I think reading reviews and doing your research on where to go based on what you want is essential. Second thing is getting your flights super early. I would say at least 6 months because the prices will go up.
They vary too, yeah.
They vary. They have sales here and there, but it's very rare. Tuesdays tend to be the days that they have sales. Like Tuesdays are the days that, you know, you can get good tickets.
Good point.
Also, checking if your flight comes with bags or not. I learned that the hard way. I'm like, oh, this flight is $300 all the way to, you know, Japan, and it's 14 hours. And they're like, oh, damn, there's no bags. And then the one bag one way is $90. So it adds up.
Yeah.
And then you have to buy your seat on top of that. So that was a big thing. And then last one I would say is learn basic, like the country's language, like how to say hi, how to say bye, how to say thank you, how to say where's the bathroom and where's the nearest restaurant. Like basic, you can write it down in your notes.
Have a reference on your phone or something.
Have Google Translate.
Yes.
And this is a big one. Currency converter. Have a currency converter app where you can just go and literally put, you know, USD to pesos if that's what you want, because that will help you navigate, because
you get the best rate too.
Best rate, yeah.
You don't want to be taking advantage of.
And want to know what you pay, because what I saw a lot when I was traveling is like people just didn't even know what they were paying. So they would get ripped off. They're like, oh, 100 pesos. And I'm like, do you know how much that is in USD? Yeah. And they wouldn't. So a lot of people do get ripped off. So it's best to know. I always had this trick where I want to know at least what $5 is in that country's money. Yeah. So I can navigate and see, okay, I know what I'm paying for. So there's a lot, but those are like the top 5, I would say.
Those are good ones. Like definitely, those are good ones. I traveled to Bali before. It was the farthest place I've been.
And that's one of the most expensive for foreigners, because they know that a lot of foreigners go there.
Yeah, a lot of foreigners. Actually, everything was pretty cheap. Very cheap. But the currency is important because you can get rip off. And then also like if you over tip them, then they also feel some type of way about that.
In Korea.
Like they want to feel mindful. You want to also be mindful of like, they don't necessarily appreciate it. Not like American. If you give them a huge tip, they're like, oh yeah, thank you, great. Over there, not necessarily. You know, they could take it as a different way for them. So it's important to be mindful of that and just giving them the correct amount or...
Yeah, that's part of the research. Like really, I think that's a good point that you make, like the tipping culture. For some cultures, it could be offensive. So you really want to make sure that you do your research.
Okay. Well, I do want to know, because you've been in so many countries, what are your top 3 countries?
That's a hard question. Oh my gosh, let me think. I don't want to do it by order, but just my top 3.
Top 3, yeah.
Philippines.
Ooh.
The Philippines, it's amazing, cheap, and beautiful. Japan, it's futuristic, lights everywhere, amazing food. And then I would say out of my comfort zone, South Africa. South Africa was something that a place that I never thought I would go, but because I had a friend who I met in Korea and I had the opportunity to stay with her, I got the full experience, and it was just so different that I feel like it's so memorable to me, because I never thought I wouldn't have gone if I didn't meet her, right? I wouldn't have been like somewhere that I think it was on my top list, but because I stayed in her town, I got the full experience.
That's so cool. Awesome. Okay. Well, that has been great, Vanessa. I love everything. Let's wrap up the podcast with... I'm going to ask something fun we do in the podcast is I ask you the question of the last guest, and then you leave one for the next one.
Okay.
So the last guest asked the following question, which was, if you could go back in time and do a different career, which you had an option to in the past, which one would it be? And how would your life be different compared to what you do now?
That's a good question. I think I'm currently a mental health therapist. But as I've shared, you know, in my undergrad years, I was able to teach. That wasn't something that I ever thought I would do, but I enjoyed it. So I think that has been the second, like, maybe career that I would have considered, and I loved it. It was a career at that time, but it wasn't something that I planned for. So I think that if I wasn't a mental health therapist, I would continue teaching and getting my master's in education and continue to teach international students, particularly because that's what I really enjoy doing.
And how do you think it would have been different to what you do now?
I think that I wouldn't be emotionally drained, because as in my career, I do hear a lot of things that do drain you emotionally. So I think I would have been able to focus on the academic piece. So it would have been less draining, but I love what I do. So I don't regret it. And the cool thing is that if I wanted to teach, I could.
Yes, true. You can always go back to something. Yeah. That's great. I love that. So what would be your question for next guest?
Since we're on the topic of traveling, and I love traveling, I'm passionate about traveling, I would ask the next guest, where have you wanted to travel, and what is holding you back from traveling to that destination?
Ooh, that's a good question. Okay, I love that. Well, Vanessa, it has been a pleasure having you. Where can people find you?
People can find me on Instagram. My Instagram handle is NessNessA, NESS_NESS_A. So you can find me there.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'll link in the description.
Of course.
And then we'll link the places that you talk about doing the research. A couple of those websites, we'll link them as well so people know where to go. And yes, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I think a lot of our audience are going to enjoy this conversation just for the fact that you get to talk about a little bit of being a solo traveler. Maybe they'll be brave to do it themselves as well.
Please do. Awesome. If you have any questions, let me know. And it was a pleasure being on your podcast.
Thank you. Please reach out, guys. Well, if you guys liked this episode, please like it, subscribe, leave your comment, contact us. We'd love to hear your opinion or anything. You have any questions. Yeah, and that's been all for today. Thank you, guys. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks for listening to Siris Says. Don't forget to follow, subscribe, and drop a like. Share your thoughts in the comments and stay tuned for more inspiring stories. Until next time, keep chasing those dreams.